At that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for this census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. These verses form the basis of our nativity story, the image that we so often hold of the nativity, even this picture we have of a stable, though there is no stable actually mentioned. All we really know is that there's no lodging available and that Jesus is laid in a manger. And a manger is a feeding trough, so that implies the presence of animals. So this might have even just meant someone's backyard where they kept their animals, or if it was a stable, it would have likely at this time in history, in this place in the world, been a cave. And so not an ideal situation, right? It kind of feels like some of our nightmare Airbnb stories. Like, anyone have those, right? Like you were told one thing on the description, then you show up and it's something completely different. It's like a shed someone converted into a bedroom, and then you realize, like, oh, the kitchen and the bathroom is kind of the same room, and they share one sink. Like, this is not good. This year, Olivia and I had this Airbnb experience where it was this unit in someone's backyard, this little tiny home, and it was really cute. But there on the description, it said that there was going to be, just a couple of chickens and maybe some light clucking. Okay, and this light clucking was a false promise, because what it turned out was that there was a chicken coop right next to the tiny home with a rooster that crowed for 3 hours every morning, starting from before the sun coming up. So I do relate a little bit to this idea of expectations not being met with the place that you're staying. And really all we do know for sure is that where they end up, there is this manger. And I want to kind of do something a little different this Christmas. I want to talk about the manger, maybe a little more than we often do. And when I was thinking about the manger, and I was thinking about what is in my life that's like a manger? What do I interact with on the day-to-day basis that's like a manger? And the closest I could come up with is my dog's bowl. Now, I have washed it very thoroughly. Otherwise, I would not be holding it so close to my face. I love my dog, but you know how it is, and I know some of you are like, I'm not going to shake his hand after. I was planning on it, and now that's gone out the window. But the reason I have my dog's bowl is because this is actually the closest I come to a manger, because a manger is something that animals ate out of, which makes it something that is beyond ordinary, beyond earthy, beyond mundane, below the mundane. And yet what's fascinating about this story is that it actually elevates the manger into something transcendent because of what it held. That this manger holds something divine or something sacred. Now, as I stated at the very beginning of our time together, there is no requirement of belief of anything really to be here. And this service isn't about getting you to believe in anything in particular. It's really for us to just take a look at a story and to recognize that in this story, the divine enters into the human realm. That baby Jesus is a representation of something beyond, greater than human, something divine entering into the story of humanity in a place that is quiet, overlooked, maybe someone considered low. And in some sense, right, realizing that there wasn't even room for this family anywhere in this whole town, that on some level it was an unwelcome place. There's a fascinating, an author and monk by the name of Thomas Merton, some of you may know, who said, into this world, this demented inn, in which there is absolutely no room for him at all, Christ comes uninvited. Now, again, if we want to look at that word Christ as language for that may mean for us today an invitation towards love, an invitation towards wholeness, an invitation towards seeing the world in greater unity, right? And you don't need any kind of faith system or framework to recognize that we have these invitations, right? Something is moving through the world and through the universe, inviting us to expand our hearts towards greater love. And if we just look at that as a perspective, as a way of being in the world, then surely, yes, does that go so often uninvited, particularly in our world that we live in today, right? It shows up in a manger or a cave, a place that most wouldn't really even know to look for it. And yet in this story, that's the very place, it's the very thing in which heaven meets earth. And so what I hope to do today, right, just for the next 10 minutes or so, is to invite you to see that perhaps the manger in many ways is very much like this human life and this human body we all have, because you and I, like the manger, we are the place where the divine rests. And see, this is a community that we don't really have beliefs. We certainly have no requirement of any beliefs here, but I will share something that I do believe, or at least I operate as though it is true. I believe that every human being is sacred, that every human being holds within them the spark of the divine. And that means that even in our ordinary lives, even in the messiness and the complicated nature of our human lives, that the divine is there nonetheless, right? That we humans, right, we come from the dirt, from the soil, quite literally. We're made of the same stuff. All the same elements in the soil are in our bodies. And yet that soil also comes from the stars, right? So you've also probably heard it said that we are stardust, right? And so it's an amazing journey, amazing arc of human existence, right? That we're both a speck of dust in the cosmos, and yet we are also this cosmic miracle. There's a rabbi who once said that we ought to carry two pieces of paper, one in each pocket, one that says that I am but dust and ashes, and the other saying the world was made for me, right? We find ourselves in this interesting midpoint because we are these humans with this capacity for consciousness, to comprehend the infinite, to love. So just like the manger, we are that middle point, that meeting place between the dirt and the stars, between heaven and earth. There's a Latin phrase, axis mundi, which essentially means the sacred center. It's something that kind of shows up in various religious thought, that in different traditions, there is this belief that maybe the place where the heavens meet the earth is actually a physical location, right? So some spiritual traditions would say that, there is this holy mountain, or there is this holy river, or the tree of life, a specific place that is that axis mundi, that sacred center. But what I think is so beautiful, what I tend to find, especially when we look at the mystics, it seems that the revelation of spirituality is that it is you and I that are truly the axis mundi. You and I are the sacred center of the universe, because you and I, as human beings, are where the infinite and the finite meet, right? We have, not just on a weekly or daily basis, but perhaps every hour we have experiences that vacillate from incredibly earthly and mundane into something sacred and transcendent. For me, like in the same day, I might find myself studying my dog's poop to make sure she didn't eat anything dangerous. And then in the next hour, I might be having a conversation with someone in which I can see the sacred and the divine and the infinite showing up in their story. That both belong. Both are part of it. Can we accept that we are both, right? And not apologize for it? Does the manger apologize for being a manger, right? It might not have been on Mary's Amazon wish list, but it doesn't need to apologize because it was there. It was what was available in this story. And in the same way, friends, I don't think we need to apologize for our humanity, for being human. Some of us grew up in a religious system that may have given us some shame about the human body or the human life, that we were led to believe that this existence is something to be escaped or transcended. But what I find beautiful about the story is that we see in it the actual perfect union of the human and the divine. That if there were room at the inn, right, if Jesus was born in a Jerusalem king, this might have been a very different story. That one might have just kind of flown right over the radar. There is no Jerusalem king. There is a California king. There is an Alaskan king. There is even a Wyoming king, friends. But there is no Jerusalem king. So anyway, just want to. But if there was, and that was where Jesus was born, it might have given a whole different flavor and tone to this story. But the beauty of this story is that we have the ordinary and the extraordinary side by side. Right? That something can be both simultaneously. It's not about perfection, not in the way that we tend to look at perfection. And so really my encouragement for us today is will we be willing to look at ourselves and others and this world and even humanity itself and see the divine and see the transcendent, even in the places that we often consider low, the places that we often overlook. There was a mystic named Teilhard de Chardin who once said that there is a secret presence of God in the depths of things, which reveals itself only to those who search. I grew up with a religion that caused me to see the divine as something that was elsewhere, that was always outside of my reach or outside of my grasp, and that this life was more or less a waiting room, that there were bigger and better things yet to come. What I find so ironic about this story is that the tradition, the Christmas story, places Jesus in the manger, and yet culturally, we so often pull Jesus out of the manger. We don't want Jesus in something so ordinary and so earthy. But what if we allowed this story to heal our relationship to humanity? What if we allowed this story to heal our relationship to the earth, to heal some of those ideas that we were all handed about our bodies, about this planet, about humanity itself? It's a lifelong journey. It's going to be lifelong work. We all probably discover the way that these ideas show up in our lives every single day. But I think that the beauty of this journey is that we are in many ways returning to the manger, appreciating the manger for what it is. It's a process. You know, I've talked about religion a little bit, and you know, I'm specifically referring to a version, an expression of religion that maybe a lot of us have grown up with. But that word in its most basic root, in its Latin, it comes from this Latin root re, like again, and ligare, which is the same root word for the word ligament. So it's to reconnect, as though you are connecting your bones, your joints. It's a word of healing. Perhaps this word in its most pure form is the practices, the spaces that reconnect us to wholeness, that reconnect the things that have been separated. And so perhaps the journey of spirituality is remembering ourselves as divine, and perhaps even quite literally remembering ourselves as divine. Not in spite of our humanity and these human bodies and these human lives, but actually because of it. That it's our bodies that allow us this experience. It's our lives that are a gift through which we have the opportunity to do any of this at all. And so perhaps the Christmas story does not have to be something that simply happened a few millennia ago. Perhaps it can also be for today, about the new birth that is happening in you and I today. What is sacred showing up in your life today? What is hopeful? What are new possibilities showing up in your life today? Greater invitations toward love showing up in your life today. And like a baby, like a child in a manger, it is often something that is delicate, something that requires nurture. Again, as I shared at the beginning of this service, there's this great quote from Meister Eckhart. He says, "What good is it that Christ was born thousands of years ago if he is not born in me today?" And you and I can allow that. We can invite that. We can say, yes, Maybe it's not even just something that happened or happens, but it's a recognition of something that was there all along. The divine is inside of us, right? It's not something we can earn or not something we can lose. And our humanity doesn't have to be an obstacle, right? That we're the manger. The divine is resting here, and we can accept that. We can embrace that, even with our failures, even with our scars, our mistakes, our imperfections, and even humanity itself, right? Yes, we live in a broken world. Yes, we are a broken people. And at the same time, we are this cosmic miracle capable of such beauty, goodness, and truth. There's an ancient Sufi mystic and poet who once said in one of his poems, "I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being." I'm going to invite the band to come back on stage. I'm going to invite our ushers to join us at the front of the stage as well. And, as we close today, I want to then kind of fast forward because, you have Jesus who, in many ways, was reminding his own people the astonishing light within them, what they were capable of, what was possible. And through history, his words, his teachings have done the same for us and the teachings of other amazing spiritual teachers. But there's this reminder and this invitation to see the divine within. And so here's my hope for us this Christmas. May you look around at others. May you look in the mirror at yourself. And would you see the astonishing light of your own being? As we sing one last song together, our ushers are going to go down the aisles. They're going to light a candle on the edge of each row. And I encourage you during this next song to then light one candle after another, that you are spreading the light among yourselves. Just as when we recognize the divine and the beauty and the sacred and the light within, it seems to spread. It is infectious. And so as you allow this light to fill the room, would you reflect on the light showing up in your life, the divine showing up for you? And then as we close, right, with all of our lights flickering, that we would just take a moment of reflection, and that maybe we would stop and reflect on the year past, things we are grateful for. Maybe we would look to the year ahead, set some intentions for how we hope to see the light and the divine show up in the year to come. Maybe you would say a prayer for a world that desperately needs it.